When I saw the way she looked at my shoes, I knew she had already judged me. That was the first thought that crossed my mind the day I met my son's fiancée and her parents. It wasn't anger I felt, not even shame. Just a quiet ache in my chest. The kind you feel when someone looks at you and decides your worth in the span of a second. I remember that morning clearly. The faint scent of old jasmine perfume clinging to my scarf, the little teacup with a chip on the rim sitting by my sink, and my hands trembling as I folded the blue cotton dress I had chosen to wear. It was simple but neat. I didn't own fancy jewelry anymore. Only my wedding ring and a pair of small gold studs my late husband had given me on our 10th anniversary. I didn't know then that my simplicity would be mistaken for weakness. My son, Daniel, had called me 2 weeks earlier, his voice full of excitement. "Mom, I've met someone," he said. "Her name's Clara, we're serious. I want you to meet her family." I had waited for that call for years. Daniel was my only child, a quiet, bookish boy who had lost his father too young. I'd raised him mostly alone, running a small craft business from home. He had grown into a kind man, hardworking, respectful, or at least I thought so. The meeting was set at a restaurant in the city. I'd never been there before, a place with glass walls, marble floors, and waiters who smiled without smiling. When I walked in, Daniel was already there, looking sharp in a dark jacket. He waved, but something in his eyes seemed nervous. "Mom, this is Clara," he said, turning to the young woman beside him. Clara was beautiful, the kind of beauty that photographs well. Her hair was perfectly set, her lipstick a soft rose, and her dress elegant but deliberate. She extended her hand lightly, her fingers cold. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Harris," she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Then came her parents. Her mother, Helen, had that kind of face that was always scanning, measuring. Her father, Richard, barely looked up from his phone before muttering a curt, "Hello." We sat down, and I felt like an uninvited guest at my own son's life. The table gleamed with silver cutlery, the kind you hesitate to touch. I placed my small handbag beside me and tried to relax. "So, Mrs. Harris," Helen began, stirring her coffee, "what do you do these days?" "I'm retired," I said softly. "I used to run a handmade crafts shop for years. My husband and I started it together." "Oh," she replied, nodding slowly. "That's nice. Clara's father runs a logistics firm. We've been quite busy with international clients lately." Her tone made it sound like a competition I hadn't entered. I smiled politely. "That must be a lot of work." Richard finally looked up, eyeing me for a brief second. "And you live?" "Where exactly?" "In Maple Street," I said. "Near the old train station." Helen's brows lifted slightly. "Oh, that side of town." She sipped her coffee. Clara grew up in the Oak Ridge district. "Much quieter." Daniel's face reddened a little. "Mom's place is cozy, you'd love it," he said quickly. I watched him, wondering if he noticed the way his fiancée's mother had said that side of town, as if it were a disease. I stayed quiet mostly, letting them talk about their vacations in Italy, their golf club memberships, and Clara's charity events. When the waiter came, Helen ordered wine without asking anyone else's preference. Daniel avoided my eyes when I requested plain tea. Halfway through lunch, Helen leaned toward me. "You must be very proud of Daniel. Clara tells us he's doing quite well at the firm." "Yes," I said softly. "He's always been a good worker." "Well," she said, tapping her glass, "we're just glad he's found someone who matches his ambitions." There it was again, that invisible line between us and them. And Daniel, my son, sat quietly on their side of it. I excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. The walls inside were marble too. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I felt. I ran a hand over my hair, whispering to myself, "You're fine, Martha. You've faced worse." When I returned, Helen was showing Daniel and Clara something on her phone, a picture of a large estate. "We're planning to gift them a house once they're married," she said, smiling. "It's tradition in our family." "That's generous," I said. "Oh, it's nothing," Helen waved. Of course, we'll make sure everything is proper. We want our daughter comfortable. I smiled again, even though something inside me tightened. I knew that tone, the one that said we'll take care of things, you just stay out of the way. When the lunch ended, Helen reached for the bill, but Daniel stopped her. No, please, Mom and I can handle it. She chuckled softly. Oh, Daniel, don't be silly. Let us. I opened my wallet quietly, but Daniel shook his head quickly, almost embarrassed. It's fine, Mom. They've got it. The way he said they stung more than I wanted to admit. Outside, as they waited for their car, Clara's father extended a polite hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harris, he said, already turning away. Clara kissed my cheek lightly. We'll see you soon, she said. Her perfume lingered, sweet but cold. When they left, Daniel stayed behind for a moment. Mom, he said softly, rubbing the back of his neck, I know they can seem a bit much, but they mean well. I smiled, though my heart felt heavier than my purse. Of course they do, dear. They're your family now. He hesitated, looking at me the way people look at something fragile. They just come from a different world, you know? I understand, I said, but as I watched him walk away toward their sleek black car, I realized something unsettling. For the first time, I felt like a stranger to my own son. That night, I sat alone in my small kitchen. The clock ticked softly. I brewed myself another cup of tea, the same kind I'd had at that restaurant. It tasted different here, warmer, more honest, and as I sat there, I made a quiet decision. If they saw me as poor and naive, then that's exactly who I would be. At least for now, because sometimes pretending to be weak is the best way to see who's truly strong. I kept my word. For the next few weeks, I played the role they had written for me. The simple, harmless mother who didn't know much about money or manners. I dressed modestly, spoke softly, and nodded through every conversation. It wasn't pride that made me hide the truth. It was curiosity and maybe a little heartbreak. I wanted to see if love could still exist when there was nothing to gain. The wedding preparations began quickly. Clara's family took charge of almost everything. The venue, the guest list, even the menu. Daniel would call me sometimes, his voice distant, as if he were speaking from another life. Mom, Helen wants to handle the seating arrangements. She says it'll be more organized. That's fine, I said, even though my heart sank a little. And about the ceremony, it's going to be at their estate, okay? Of course, dear, I replied. I had dreamed of Daniel getting married in the small church near our home, the same one where his father and I had exchanged vows. But I swallowed that thought like a bitter seed. Clara would call me occasionally, her tone always polite but careful. Mrs. Harris, could you please bring your ID on Thursday? The wedding planner needs it for the invitations. Oh, that's no problem, dear. And please don't worry about gifts. My mother insists on handling all that. That's very thoughtful, I said. But I knew what she meant. Don't try to contribute. You wouldn't know how. One Sunday afternoon, they invited me to the estate to finalize some details. The invitation was polite, but I could feel it wasn't truly for me. Still, I went. I always did. The drive there took almost an hour, winding through clean, tree-lined streets until I reached tall white gates guarded by security cameras. The house itself was enormous, all glass, marble, and manicured perfection. I stood for a moment, taking it in, feeling small but strangely calm. Helen greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Mrs. Harris, you made it. Come in, watch your step, the floors are quite polished. Her voice was sweet, but the words were edged with control. Inside, everything smelled of lilies and expensive cleaning products. I noticed Daniel at the far end of the room, sitting with Clara and her father, flipping through a wedding catalog. He didn't look up when I entered. Would you like some tea? Helen asked. Yes, please, I said. She gestured to a housekeeper, then turned back to me. So, Mrs. Harris, we've been talking about the guest list. You mentioned you wanted to invite a few of your friends. Yes? Just 3 women from church and my late husband's brother. Oh, she said lightly. Well, the seating is limited, but we'll see what we can do. She said we'll see the way some people say, probably not. I sat quietly while they continued discussing flowers and music. Helen's voice filled the room like perfume, pleasant at first, but too strong after a while. Clara wants a classical quartet, not a band, she said. And the color theme is ivory and gold. No bright colors, please. They can look tacky in photos. I smiled and nodded, though I'd already bought a soft blue shawl to wear over my dress. It had been my husband's favorite color. After a while, Daniel walked over to me, hands in his pockets. "Mom, are you okay? You look a little quiet." "I'm fine, dear," I said. "Just listening." He smiled awkwardly. "You know, Helen's just trying to help. She does this for all big family events." "I'm sure she means well," I replied. Helen approached then, resting a manicured hand on his shoulder. "Oh, Daniel, we were thinking of having the rehearsal dinner here. Your mother's welcome to come." "Of course." "Of course," he said, smiling at her. Not at me. That, of course, hurt more than any insult could have. Later, as I sipped my tea, far too bitter and lukewarm, Helen began a new topic. "So, Mrs. Harris, Daniel mentioned you live alone now? Must be difficult, keeping up a house by yourself." "It's peaceful," I said. "Yes, but still. Have you thought about selling it? I'm sure Daniel could help manage your finances once he's married." I looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't asking out of concern. She was measuring. I smiled gently. "Oh, I'm not ready to part with that house. It's full of memories." She gave a polite laugh. "Of course. Sentimental value. I understand." But she didn't. Not even a little. When I got home that night, the house felt smaller than before. I sat by the window, looking out at the garden my husband had planted years ago, the same garden Daniel used to play in as a boy. I whispered, "He's growing away from me, Henry." The wind rustled the old oak leaves as if answering. That week, I decided to test something. I invited Clara and Daniel for dinner at my place. A simple meal, nothing fancy. I wanted to see how she would behave when there was no audience, no crystal chandelier above her head. They arrived an hour late. "Oh, sorry," Clara said, glancing around my small living room. "We got caught in traffic." Her eyes traveled over the faded curtains, the worn sofa, the family pictures on the wall. "It's cozy," she said finally. I smiled. "It's home." Dinner was quiet. I'd made stew and baked bread, the same recipe Daniel loved as a child. He barely touched it. Clara picked at her food delicately, as though afraid of the taste. Halfway through, she asked, "So, Mrs. Harris, what do you think of the wedding dress I chose?" "It's a custom design from Italy. I'm sure it'll be beautiful," I said. She smiled, satisfied. "Helen says it's worth every penny. She insists I should only have the best." I looked at my son. "And what do you think, Daniel?" He shrugged. "If it makes her happy, Mom." That was when I knew. My boy was already lost in their world. After they left, I sat at the table long after the dishes were cold. I ran my hand over the wood grain, remembering how Daniel's little hands once drummed on it while waiting for dessert. I whispered to myself, "You've done well, Martha. Now keep watching. Because sometimes the people who underestimate you will show you who they truly are, if you stay silent long enough." It started with a phone call on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the garden, trimming the rose bushes that Henry had planted years ago. The sun was soft that day, the kind that makes the world look kind, even when it isn't. My hand smelled of soil and rosemary when I heard my phone ring. "Hello?" "Mom, it's me," Daniel said. His voice sounded distracted, like he was doing something else while talking. "Hey, listen, Clara and her parents are hosting a dinner this weekend. They'd like you to come. It's kind of a family gathering before the wedding." I smiled. "Of course, dear. What time should I—" "Actually," he interrupted. "They were thinking it might be better if you came a bit later. You know, just after dessert. It's more of a business thing first. Some of Clara's father's clients will be there." I froze for a moment. "Clients?" "Yeah," he said quickly. It's nothing personal. It's just that Helen wants to keep it small at first. Small, I almost laughed. I could picture the long dining table, the expensive china, the laughter echoing under chandeliers, and me, walking in after dessert when the real guests had gone. "All right," I said quietly. "After dessert it is." When I hung up, I sat on the porch steps, brushing bits of dirt from my hands. The rose bushes rustled softly in the wind. For a moment, I wondered what Henry would have said if he'd been here. He always had a way of reading people's hearts before their words. The dinner was that Saturday. I arrived at 8, carrying a small basket of homemade pastries, a polite gesture, though I doubted they'd eat any. Helen greeted me at the door, her smile too bright. "Oh, Mrs. Harris, you made it. We're just wrapping up dessert, just as planned." Inside, the house was full of laughter and the faint scent of wine. Several guests were putting on coats, and I caught the tail end of a joke Richard was telling. Something about not marrying below your bracket. They didn't notice me. Daniel came over, looking both relieved and nervous. "Hey, Mom, glad you came." "Thank you for inviting me," I said softly, handing him the basket. Clara appeared beside him, her eyes landing on the pastries. "Oh, how sweet. You baked these yourself?" "Yes," I said. "Daniel used to love them as a boy." Her smile didn't move her eyes. "That's lovely." We sat in the living room and Helen poured me tea. The cup was thin porcelain, delicate and cold. She didn't ask how I liked it, she simply served it. "So, Mrs. Harris," she began, crossing her legs, "Clara and Daniel will need a good start in life. We're planning to gift them the new Oak Ridge townhouse after the wedding." "That's very kind," I said. "Oh, it's nothing," she said. "Family supports family, right? And of course, Daniel will contribute where he can." She smiled, but there was something in her tone, something possessive. I felt a quiet discomfort growing in my chest. "Of course," I said again. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You know, Mrs. Harris, I was thinking, since you live alone, maybe it would be nice for you to move closer to us. We could help you with things." "I imagine maintaining that old house must be quite a task at your age," I smiled faintly. "It's not so bad. I'm used to doing things myself." "Still," she said, forcing a gentle laugh, "it's better to be near family. You never know what could happen." I nodded, though her words felt like a warning disguised as kindness. Later that evening, as people chatted around the piano, I noticed something strange. Helen was whispering to Clara near the fireplace, both glancing toward me and then quickly looking away. A few moments later, Clara's father joined them. His tone was low, but his words drifted just enough for me to hear. "Need to make sure Daniel's finances are consolidated before the wedding. We can't have separate accounts and it's messy." I froze. My teacup trembled slightly in my hand. Helen murmured, "Don't worry. I've already spoken to him about it. He said his mother has some savings, but nothing major." "Good," Richard replied. "We don't need her complicating things." They laughed softly. I looked down at my tea, feeling a slow ache rise inside me. Not because of the words themselves, but because my son, my Daniel, had apparently spoken about my life like I was a financial detail. That night, I drove home in silence. The road lights blurred in my eyes. I wasn't angry yet. I was still trying to understand. A few days later, Daniel came by. It was rare for him to visit alone anymore. He looked restless, pacing as he talked. "Mom, Clara's family wants to handle the wedding expenses. They said it's simpler that way, but they asked if you could contribute a little toward the honeymoon fund. You know, just a gesture." I stared at him for a moment. "A gesture?" "Yeah," he said quickly. "They're paying for everything else." I told them you might not have much, but I interrupted softly. "You told them that?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yeah, I mean, you live pretty simply. It's not an insult." "No," I said quietly. "Not an insult, just an assumption," he sighed. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it is. They just want everything to look proper." Proper. The word hung in the air like a sour smell. I smiled gently. All right, Daniel. I'll help with the honeymoon fund. His eyes softened, relief washing over his face. Thank you, Mom. You're the best. When he left, I went to my study and opened the drawer of my old writing desk. Inside were the property deeds, the savings certificates, the ownership papers for the shop I'd rented out for years. None of them knew about it, not even Daniel. I traced my fingers along the edges of the papers and whispered, "Let them think what they want, because the longer they believed I was powerless, the clearer their true nature became." But the first real crack came 2 weeks later, when I went to drop off some handmade decorations for the wedding. Helen met me at the door again. "Oh, Mrs. Harris," she said, frowning slightly. "About the decorations? Clara thinks we should go in a more elegant direction. We've hired professionals for that." "I understand," I said, holding the box in my hands. She hesitated. "Maybe you can keep these for sentimental value. They don't quite fit the theme." She took the box gently, then placed it on the floor near the shoe rack, like it was something fragile yet unwanted. I looked at her, then smiled. "That's all right. You must have a wonderful vision for the day," she smiled back, victorious. "We do." As I turned to leave, I caught a reflection of myself in their large hallway mirror. A small woman with gray streaks in her hair, standing in a world of glittering chandeliers, and I thought to myself, they see a poor, naive woman, but someday soon they'll see everything they've ignored. It was the night before the wedding when everything came to light. I hadn't planned to overhear anything. I was only there to drop off Daniel's suit, which he had left at my house after his last visit. But fate has a strange way of placing truth right where it can no longer be ignored. When I arrived, the estate was already alive with activity. Servants moved in and out with floral arrangements and boxes of crystal glasses. Laughter and music floated from the open windows, and the glow of chandeliers spilled across the driveway like gold dust. I knocked gently. Helen opened the door herself, wearing a silk robe and an expression that flickered briefly with irritation. "Oh, Mrs. Harris," she said, voice tight. "We're quite busy. What brings you here?" "I just came to drop off Daniel's suit," I said softly, holding up the garment bag. "He'll need it in the morning." Her eyes darted to the bag. "Oh, right. Leave it with the staff." I nodded and stepped inside. But as I placed the suit on a side chair, I heard familiar voices coming from the parlor. Daniel's, Clara's, and Helen's. I knew I shouldn't listen. But something, maybe a mother's instinct, made me pause in the hallway. Clara's voice was sharp, impatient. "Mom, you promised me this would all be settled before tomorrow." Helen sighed. "It will be, darling. You need to relax. Daniel's just being sentimental." Then Daniel's voice, quieter, uncertain. "I just think maybe we shouldn't rush the transfer. My mom doesn't even know about it yet." My heart skipped. "Transfer?" Clara snapped. "Daniel, it's not a big deal. We're just putting the house in both our names. That's normal for newlyweds." "I know," he said, "but she's still on the papers. The title's in her name, even if she never really—" Helen interrupted, her tone cool. "Daniel, listen to me. Your mother's house isn't doing her any favors. It's old, it's small, and frankly, she can't maintain it forever. Once it's transferred, you and Clara can sell it. Use that money for something useful. Your future." My breath caught. I felt the walls tilt around me. "Sell my house?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't want her to feel betrayed." Helen's voice softened, dripping with false comfort. "Oh, dear boy, she won't. We'll tell her it's just paperwork, that it makes things easier for her. You're helping her, really." There was silence, then Clara's voice impatient again. "Daniel, if you don't do it, I'll start our marriage with a lie. You said you wanted us to be partners." "Well, this is part of it," Daniel exhaled shakily. "Fine, I'll talk to her. After the wedding." The sound of glasses clinking followed. A toast, maybe. I couldn't breathe. After the wedding, they were planning to take my home, the one my husband and I built from the ground up. Brick by careful brick, every corner filled with memories. I stepped backward, my hands trembling, my throat dry. The laughter from the parlor followed me like an echo from another world. I drove home that night in silence, the headlights painting long shadows on the road. I didn't cry, not yet. My tears felt too precious to waste on people who no longer saw me as human. Inside my little house, I sat on the couch and stared at the framed photograph of Henry. His smile gentle, his eyes full of the patience I had always leaned on. "Do you hear them, Henry?" I whispered. "They're planning to take the house. Our home." For a long while, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock. And then slowly I began to smile. Not from joy, from clarity, because the time for pretending was over. The next morning, I arrived at the estate earlier than anyone expected. The wedding planner was directing workers, and the house buzzed with activity. I walked past them quietly, heading straight for the back garden where the ceremony was being prepared. Helen spotted me almost immediately. "Mrs. Harris," she called, startled. "You're early. Everything's still being set up." "I know," I said gently. "I thought I'd see the place before all the guests arrive." She smiled thinly. "Well, just don't get in the way. We've got a tight schedule." I nodded and began walking the grounds. Everywhere I looked, I saw extravagance. Imported flowers, white silk chairs, golden ribbons. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt hollow. Then I saw Daniel. He was standing by the terrace speaking to Clara. He looked nervous. When he noticed me, his eyes widened slightly. "Mom, you're here early." "I am," I said calmly. "I thought I'd drop by before the ceremony." Clara smiled, though her lips tightened. "How sweet of you. Everything's almost ready." "Yes," I said softly. "Almost." I waited until the guests began to arrive. Music filled the air, and people mingled with champagne glasses in hand. I sat quietly in the second row, watching as Daniel stood at the altar, handsome but tense. Clara glided down the aisle like she was born for attention. The ceremony was flawless. Too flawless. Every smile rehearsed, every word polished. But when it was time for the families to gather for photographs, Helen took charge again. "Let's have one with the parents," she announced. She gestured for Richard to stand beside Clara, and then motioned for me to move to the far end of the frame, half in shadow. Something inside me clicked then. Quiet, steady, final. I stepped forward, voice calm but carrying. "Before the photos, I'd like to say something." The crowd hushed. Helen blinked, unprepared. "Mrs. Harris, maybe we can—" "No," I said, still gentle. "It won't take long." I turned to Daniel. "Son, I overheard something last night. About the house. About transferring it." His face went pale. "Mom, I know," I said softly. "You planned to tell me after the wedding. I just wanted to spare you that burden." A murmur rippled through the guests. Helen stiffened. Clara's face drained of color. I reached into my small purse and took out a folded envelope. For years, I've lived quietly. People assumed I didn't have much. Maybe because I dress simply, or because I don't talk about money. "But that house you were planning to transfer, Daniel? It's not the only thing I own." Gasps, curious glances. I opened the envelope, showing a few neatly folded papers. "These are the deeds, not just to my home, but to the property your wedding venue stands on. I leased it to the event company years ago. And the shop in town? Still mine. All of it." Clara's lips parted. Helen's hand clutched her pearls. I continued, calm as ever. "I never said I was poor. I simply wanted to see how people would treat me when they thought I had nothing." For a moment, silence hung heavy as the summer air. Then I looked at Daniel. My son. My heart. His eyes glistened with disbelief and shame. "Mom, I didn't know," he whispered. "I know you didn't," I said. "But they did. And they used that to make you ashamed of me." I turned toward Clara and her mother. I've met many kinds of people in my life. Kind ones, cruel ones, and clever ones who mistake cruelty for cleverness. I don't need your apology. I just wanted you to see that wealth doesn't make a person respectable. Character does. For a long moment, no one spoke. Cameras clicked awkwardly. Whispers fluttered through the crowd like startled birds. Then Helen found her voice, brittle and sharp. "Mrs. Harris, this is highly inappropriate." I smiled faintly. "So is trying to steal from family. With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Daniel call out, but I didn't stop. The wind carried the faint sound of guests murmuring. Disbelief, pity, admiration. I didn't care which, because for the first time in months, I felt light. That night, I sat in my quiet home again, the same one they had planned to take from me. I brewed myself a cup of tea and watched the moonlight spill across the kitchen floor. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired and free. The truth had done its work. The morning after the wedding felt strangely still. No phone calls, no messages, not even a knock on the door. The world that had been spinning so fast suddenly stopped, leaving only silence. Like the pause after a storm, I sat by the window, my cup of tea growing cold, watching the neighborhood children walk to school. Their laughter drifted through the air, sweet and light, so unlike the heaviness sitting in my chest. I had exposed the truth. Yes. But I had also shattered illusions. And now, everyone was dealing with the pieces in their own way. By afternoon, word had spread through town like wildfire. The poor widow who'd been looked down on turned out to own half the very estate her daughter-in-law's family bragged about. People couldn't stop talking. Some pitied me, others admired me, and some feared me. But I didn't care for gossip. What mattered was the silence between me and my son. That silence hurt more than any insult Helen or Clara had ever thrown. 3 days later, he came. I heard his car pull up in the driveway. That same old engine rumble I'd recognize anywhere. For a moment, my hands froze mid-motion as I was folding laundry. I wasn't sure if I was ready. But when I heard his hesitant footsteps on the porch, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Daniel stood there, shoulders slumped, his suit wrinkled, his eyes red. He looked like a boy again, lost, small, trying to find the right words. "Mom," he said softly. "Come in," I whispered. He stepped inside, eyes darting around the house, the same house he had almost signed away. He sat down at the kitchen table like he used to as a teenager after a long day at school. Only this time, the air between us was thick with unspoken truths. "I don't even know where to start," he finally said. "Then start with the truth," I said quietly, pouring him tea. He looked at his hands, trembling slightly. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. Clara's parents said it was just a formality. They made it sound so reasonable. I didn't want to upset you before the wedding. I said nothing. I knew you'd be angry, he continued, but I didn't know how much I'd hurt you until I saw your face that day. You looked at me like I was a stranger. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held them back. That's because for a moment you were, I said softly. You forgot who raised you. Who taught you to value honesty over appearances? He looked up then, his eyes full of guilt. I know, I was ashamed, Mom. They made me feel like you weren't good enough. Like I had to choose between being proud of you and being accepted by them. I reached across the table, my hand resting on his. And what did you learn? He swallowed hard. That pride built on lies doesn't last. And that I married into a family who only respected people for their money. The very thing I tried to protect you from. For the first time in days, I let a small smile touch my lips. You're learning, son. Pain teaches faster than comfort ever will. That evening, he stayed for dinner. I cooked his favorite, chicken stew with cornbread, and for a few hours it felt almost normal again. But there was a weight behind his smile, a shadow that told me the wedding celebration hadn't turned out the way he expected. When he left, he hugged me tightly, tighter than he had in years. I'll fix this, he whispered. I promise. I didn't ask what he meant. Some promises need to be proven, not spoken. Over the next week, news reached me through whispers and neighbors' gossip. Clara had moved back in with her parents after a terrible argument. Apparently, she'd screamed at Daniel for embarrassing her and her family. Helen had suffered a small nervous breakdown. Nothing serious, but enough to keep her from showing her face in public. Her husband, Richard, had tried to salvage their reputation by claiming they were the victims of deceit. but the truth was out. People knew who had tried to use whom. Their expensive dinner parties suddenly grew smaller. Invitations were rescinded. Even the local business club quietly distanced itself from Richard's dealings. In a town like ours, reputation was everything, and once broken, it never quite mended. 2 weeks later, Daniel returned again, this time looking calmer. More grounded. "I've moved out," he said simply. I blinked. "Out?" He nodded. Clara refused to apologize. She said she couldn't live with someone who chose his mother over his marriage, so I left. He tried to smile, but his eyes glistened. I guess that says it all, doesn't it? I stood up, walked over, and hugged him. It does. But don't let bitterness grow where love once lived. Learn from it and move forward. He buried his face in my shoulder. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You don't have to deserve it," I said softly. "You just have to mean it." Months passed. The gossip died down, and peace returned to my little home. Daniel visited often, sometimes helping me fix things around the house, sometimes just sitting quietly while we watched the sunset. He had grown quieter, more thoughtful. He started volunteering at a local charity, helping low-income families with home repairs. Maybe guilt drove him at first, but over time, I could see genuine kindness returning to his heart. One day, he turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, I used to think wealth was something you built in a bank. But now I realize it's what you build in people's hearts." I smiled. "Your father would be proud of you." As for me, I didn't change much. I still wore my simple clothes. I still shopped at the same market and drank the same brand of tea. The only difference was that now, when people looked at me, they saw something they hadn't before. Not money, but quiet power, and that was enough. Sometimes, I would sit by Henry's old rocking chair, feeling the gentle creak of its rhythm against the wooden floor. I'd whisper softly, "We did the right thing, Henry. We didn't raise a fool, just a man who needed to see the truth for himself." The house around me, once threatened, now felt even more sacred. Every brick was a memory, every creak a reminder of love that endured even through betrayal. But one night, as I closed the curtains, I saw something unexpected. A car stopped outside, and from it stepped Clara, her eyes swollen, her dress wrinkled, her hair unkempt. She stood by the gate for a long moment before calling softly, "Mrs. Harris?" My heart tightened. I opened the door and walked to the porch. "Clara," I said calmly, "what brings you here?" She hesitated, clutching her purse. I wanted to talk." I didn't answer. I just waited. Tears filled her eyes. "I was wrong," she said finally. "About everything. About you. About Daniel. About what matters. I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to say it." Her voice cracked. "My parents. They lost most of their investments after what happened. Everyone turned away. I've been alone, and I kept thinking about that day. The way you stood there, so calm, so strong. I've never seen anyone handle humiliation with that kind of grace." She wiped her eyes. "I want to learn from that. I don't expect you to like me. I just wanted to tell you I see you now. I really do." For a moment, I just looked at her, this young woman who once saw me as beneath her. Now stripped of pride, standing in the same humility she once mocked. I nodded slowly. "It's never too late to see clearly, child. Pain opens eyes that comfort keeps closed," she cried quietly. I didn't hug her, but I didn't turn her away either. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need to be spoken, only felt. That night, I sat back in Henry's chair again, the house wrapped in silence. I realized something. The real revelation hadn't been about money or property. It was about truth. Truth strips away masks, and though it hurts, it sets everyone free, one by one. It's been almost a year since that unforgettable day, the day I stopped pretending to be poor and showed the world who I really was. People still whisper about it sometimes, in the grocery store or at church. They lower their voices, but I can always tell when I'm the subject. Not because I mind, but because every whisper carries a different version of the same story. Some call me wise. Some call me calculating. And some just call me lucky, but I know what I am. I'm a mother who wanted to protect her son. A woman who learned that silence can be louder than shouting. My days are quiet now. I wake up early, open the curtains, and let the soft morning light pour into the kitchen. The smell of coffee fills the air, and the birds outside always seem to sing a little before the first sunbeam touches the old oak tree. That's the rhythm of my peace. Simple, slow, earned. Daniel visits every Sunday. He brings groceries and helps with repairs, though most of the time he just sits with me in the garden sipping tea, watching the wind play with the leaves. He talks about his new job. He's helping manage a small community foundation now, offering low-interest loans to struggling families. I just want to do something honest, he told me once. And I smiled, because that's the best kind of wealth a man can build, the kind that spreads warmth instead of envy. As for Clara, she and Daniel went their separate ways officially 6 months after the wedding. The marriage that had begun with so much display and pride ended quietly, without lawyers, without shouting. One afternoon, she came by again, not to ask for forgiveness this time, but to return something. It was a small framed photo, the one from the wedding, where I had stood behind them with my hands clasped, pretending to be the humble, forgotten mother. She placed it on the table and said, "I don't deserve to keep this, but you should, because that day wasn't the end of something. It was the start of me seeing the world differently." Then she smiled. A real smile this time, soft and tired, but sincere. I didn't say anything. I just placed a hand on hers for a moment. She nodded and left, and somehow I knew she'd be all right. Life has a strange way of revealing people's true worth. When I look back, I realize that pretending to be poor wasn't really about money. It was a mirror, one that showed everyone, including myself, what lay beneath the surface. Helen, with all her airs, built her pride on other people's approval. And when that cracked, her whole world fell apart. Daniel, blinded by love and fear of judgment, forgot his roots for a while. But love, even when misguided, has the power to bring people back home. And Clara, she was young, shaped by her parents' ambitions, but she had a spark of conscience in her, hidden under all that pressure to appear perfect. As for me, I learned that humility isn't pretending to be small. It's knowing your worth and still choosing kindness. Sometimes, at night, I sit by Henry's old rocking chair, the one he built with his own hands when Daniel was born. I trace my fingers along the worn armrest and whisper the words I never got to say enough. We did good, Henry. We didn't leave him money. We left him values. And that's worth more than gold. The wind moves through the curtains, and for a moment, I almost feel his presence. Gentle, steady, proud. A few weeks ago, Daniel surprised me with something. He said, "Mom, I bought back the old storefront you and Dad used to run. I'm turning it into a community kitchen. I want to name it after you, Martha's Table." My heart nearly stopped. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "You don't need to do that." He shook his head. "I want to, because everything I am now started here, at your table." That night, I couldn't sleep. I just sat by the window, watching the stars, feeling Henry close again. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. The deep, quiet kind that only comes when life finally makes sense. Looking back now, I see the path so clearly. Every mistake, every humiliation, every silence, it was leading here. To this moment of stillness, where I could look at my son and know he finally understood what love really means. Love isn't giving someone everything they want. It's teaching them to recognize what truly matters. And sometimes, that lesson comes wrapped in pain. The other day, a neighbor asked me if I ever regretted pretending to be poor that day. I smiled and said, "No, because when you strip away the gold, only truth remains. And truth, child, always shines brighter." Now, when I walk through town, people greet me differently, not because they think I'm rich, but because they've learned what respect really means. And I've learned, too, that the greatest revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's living with dignity long enough for them to see it on their own. As I sit here tonight, the lamp glowing softly beside me, I can hear Daniel humming in the kitchen, that same tune Henry used to hum while fixing things. The smell of stew fills the air and I smile to myself. The story has come full circle. The woman who once pretended to be poor now lives richer than she ever imagined. Not in money, but in peace, love, and truth. Sometimes I wonder if other mothers have gone through the same. If they've ever sat quietly in a room full of people who underestimate them, only to discover that silence can be the sharpest weapon. If you're one of them, if you've ever hidden your strength to protect someone you love, know this. Your silence doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise, and one day the world will see the truth, just like mine did. When I look back on everything that happened, the pretense, the judgment, the betrayal, and the truth, I realize something I wish I had known earlier. Sometimes, silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's the deepest form of strength. I used to think I had to explain myself to everyone, that I had to prove I was good, kind, worthy. But life has taught me that real worth doesn't need to be announced. It shows itself in how you hold your head high even when others look down on you. That day at the wedding, when I revealed the truth, it wasn't revenge. It was clarity. A mirror held up to a family blinded by pride. People always say money changes people. But the truth is, money doesn't change anyone. It just reveals who they really are. And maybe that's what happened to all of us that day. My son saw what greed can do to love. Clara saw what pride can do to kindness. And I saw what patience can do to pain. I'm not angry anymore. I don't even feel bitter. Because when you've lived long enough, you learn that forgiveness isn't letting someone off the hook. It's letting your heart breathe again. Now, when I pass by the old community kitchen that bears my name, I see families laughing, children eating, people helping each other. And I know this. The wealth we share in compassion will outlive any bank account. That's what I want to leave behind. Not a story of revenge, but a story of quiet strength, of a mother who refused to let cruelty define her. So tonight, as I turn off the lamp and the house settles into its familiar silence, I'll ask you, my dear listener, if you were in my place, sitting at that wedding, watching your own child forget where he came from, would you have spoken your truth? Or would you have stayed silent and let time reveal it for you? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow for more stories like mine. Stories about love, betrayal, and the quiet strength that carries us through it all. Goodbye.